Is it still exciting for you releasing a record, obviously a brand new album this week? It's exciting for us as fans, but as artists, what's it like?
It is. It's good to get it out there. You know, I think our favourite things are writing songs and playing them live. It's not in the studio. But I think they've made a lot of records in the last 10 or 15 years, so it becomes easier. Studio work becomes easier, you know, but it never completely feels natural, but in the way that writing or singing does. But I think we enjoy it more. But it's not. It's always very exciting to put a new record out there, because obviously we wouldn't put it out if we didn't think it was good. But
sure.
And the actual critics' response this time it's been pretty good. But that isn't really what we're looking for. We're looking to kind of put a record out and try and put our feelings and our soul into it, and then get that across to the listening public as directly as possible.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, when you think back now, it's hard to remember in the 80s when you first sort of came to prominence. You were so radical at the time, not only singing about Scotland and immigration and politics, but singing in your own accents. And I know it's something that's quite commonplace in Scottish pop music now. We hear Frightened Rabbit, The Twilight Sad, Aidan Moffat. It's quite prevalent to sing in your accents. At the time, it was like nothing else.
It was unusual. I think the only time you maybe heard it was in, I suppose, you know, some of the old rock and roll guys, there was a slight nuance in it. But I think, like with the Beatles, you used to hear the Liverpool, I used to like that, hearing the Liverpool accent coming through in the records. But the one that stood out for me was Ian Dury at the time. Essex, very different. But the fact, the confidence, the cultural confidence, the confidence in these people. And I think that was... We would never have done it any other way, but to see him do it and to know he'd done it and to make it funny and to make it sad at the same time, that was really what we wanted to do. And to get to the point where nobody really talked about it.
Sure.
But we still do.
But only in terms of calling you trailblazers. That's surely forgivable.
Yeah,
but I love that it actually comes then from a post-punk or a punk ethos almost, rather than a traditional folk or anything more political.
I always thought that was the point of punk, was to, as John Lennon said, to do it in your own way. Just get out and do something different, do something that's of you and do it in your own way. So we kind of took that forward as much as we've ever been able to do it.
And continue to do. And on that note, can we hear another song? What are you going to play us next?
Yes, this one is called Rainbows and Happy Regrets.
Fantastic. Just when you're ready. This is Proclaimers Live.
Leave it alone or it won't get better. You shouldn't touch it at all. If there was a fire and you tried to use it, it couldn't answer the call. It's like an old man in a suit of armour standing alone in a shed. If I wasn't such a humanitarian, I'd think it better off dead. Scotland forever, Erin Gobra. And how may I help you, miss? You bring such a passion to your kiss. You walking on tiptoes, you don't slurp your tea. The reason is plain to see. You grew up in a house with no TV. Give it some air and a special cuddle. Don't let it see you concern. You are the judge, let's have you ruling. It needs some friends, don't say homeschooling. Give it a wipe, cause now it's drooling. Rainbows and happy regrets. Oh, Scotland forever, Erin Gobra. And how may I help you, miss? You bring such a passion to your kiss. You are walking on tiptoes, you don't slurp your tea. The reason is plain to see. You grew up in a house with no TV. We live in an age of second chances, even if they're undeserved. Now it's a week, it heard you calling up and away. There is no stalling, here come those tears, it's loudly bawling. Rainbows and happy regrets. Rainbows and happy regrets.
That was an impressively high note at the end there. Rainbows and Happy Regrets by our guest today, the Proclaimers. Thank you again for that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I can't clap. I should explain that I'm in Edinburgh and you guys are far, far away in Glasgow, which doesn't seem right somehow.
Well, that's Scotland for you.
Isn't it just? I think one of the things that I really love about listening to these new tracks and the new record is that it's very, very obviously the Proclaimers, of course, but there are surprises in there and it's, you know, it's different as well. Were you listening to any either new music or new influences when you were writing the album, or are you just more exploring other territories?
No, I think when I write, I don't listen to other people, but I don't especially do a lot of listening. I kind of just natural whatever's in the radio or play the old record when you're drunk or whatever it is, but I don't want to be influenced by somebody else. Obviously, but I don't want a direct influence, and when I sit down, I want to forget that I've ever written a song before, so it kind of always seems fresh. So no, you are hearing stuff all the time, but I wasn't especially seeking anything out or listening very heavily to anything.
That's really lovely to think of this environment where, as you say, you want to sit down and start from scratch every time. I mean, does the same feeling? Are there certain songs that over time you've realised straight away, wow, this is, because we hold your songs so close to our hearts as you know, as an audience, as a nation, really. Do you realise at the time, do they have different lives? Or
I think sometimes you do realise you've hit something, but it's, you know, you might think you've hit something, and it turns out that everybody else doesn't really like it much. I won't go into names, but sometimes occasionally you think some songs will be bigger than they are, or some you don't really realise why it's so successful. And I also feel the same about other performers. You know, that a lot of times it's not necessarily the big hits or the songs people are known for is not always the best of what they've done. But say Sunshine and Leith itself, that song, I think we probably knew that was going to be a good one.
I mean, yeah, it's just one of these songs. Obviously, I'm projecting, I'm no songwriter. I can imagine if I was in the middle of writing that song, I'd be just weeping at the chord changes alone while it was
I was weeping because I couldn't get the lyrics. I had the tune for about a year and I couldn't get anything. I was weeping with joy when I finished it.
Now you've ruined it for me. Obviously, so not listening to anything sort of now, but I presume that the music you heard, obviously we spoke a bit about punk there, but as children in the Reid household, was there a lot of music when you were young boys?
There was loads. I mean, the radio was on all the time, and that we were born in 62, so kind of memories start from probably about 64, 65, 66, hearing the stuff. And our parents were both big music fans, so there was the record player was on, a wee tiny wee one that used to get cranked up very high, and so that there was always a lot of music in the house. And
were there any bands or artists in particular you loved or indeed loathed?
When I was a very small child, Bernard Cribbins was my favourite because he was funny. You know, you like the funny records, and then of course when you get a certain age, you like Ernie the Fastest Milkman in the West and that sort of thing. And you like comedy things when you're a kid, because all you're worried about really is football.
Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Tiptoe Through the Tulips, that was a good one. But then as you get older, of course, your life changes, and then song that you did remember hearing start coming back to you. But something like Busted by Ray Charles, which was on Ingredients and a Recipe for Soul. And he had that way of doing country songs, but doing it with a swing or doing it with an R&B style. Stuff like that, you remember that, and you remember the old jazz records or Jim Reeves. You know, it was pretty Catholic taste. It was, or opera, you know. My dad really had very, very broad taste, as did my mum. But
then a lot of these artists were the records that people would have in their houses at the time, so there is that weird sort of collective familiarity with them, I think.
That's it. We did a gig with Roy Woods 2 years ago, and I was always a big fan of the move, you know, and I said to him, look, I can remember listening to your songs when I was heading off to school when they were new, and I was 5 and 6 years old, and I think he got a bit depressed, you know, because he doesn't look that old because he dyes the beard, I think. But
the beard
doesn't
too,
play
that's
that
impressive.
Old, he's a fantastic guy. But that's it, to meet someone like that who you remember as a 5 or 6 year old kid, and then you realise that when he made those records, he was only 17 and 18, and testament to real musical talent, I think. You know.